The great chamber of the Galactic High Council floated in the darkness of space, a massive station built from the metals of 100 conquered worlds. 12 elder species had sent their representatives here today, and they had gathered not to debate or negotiate, but to watch, to witness what they believed would be the quick and painless death of a young species called humanity. Ambassador Threll of the Velith Dominion stood at the center of the chamber. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his yellow eyes moved slowly across the faces of the other council members. The Velith had conquered 37 worlds in their long history. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed civilizations, and built an empire that stretched across an entire arm of the galaxy. And now, they had set their eyes on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "The humans have refused our generous offer," Threll announced, his voice carrying the confidence of a predator discussing its next meal. "They will not surrender their solar system's mining rights. They will not accept our protection. They have chosen war." A murmur passed through the assembled representatives. The Nolari beings made of living crystal and light flickered with what might have been amusement. The Dracon War Scholars, who had studied conflict for 10,000 years, exchanged knowing glances. Everyone in the room understood what this meant. "Our fleet will arrive at their planet within the cycle," Threll continued. 400 warships against a species that has barely mastered travel within their own star system. Our military analysts have run every simulation. Our scholars have studied their weapons, their ships, their defensive capabilities. He paused, letting the moment stretch. "We calculate total human subjugation within 6 standard rotations. Perhaps less." Elder Kirith of the Nolari spoke, his crystalline form pulsing with soft blue light. 6 rotations. You are being generous, Ambassador. Our own calculations suggest 3 would be sufficient. The humans have spirit, Threll admitted, but spirit does not stop plasma cannons. They have courage, but courage does not repair broken shields. They will fight, yes. They always fight. But they will lose, as every primitive species loses when faced with superior force. Counselor Yura of the Mendari sat quietly in her floating chair, her large, dark eyes watching the proceedings with an expression that was difficult to read. The Mendari were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and their refusal to engage in warfare. They had seen many civilizations rise and fall, and they rarely spoke at council meetings. But today, she had a question. "Ambassador Threll," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Have your analysts studied human history? Not their technology or their weapons, but their history." Threll's eyes narrowed slightly. "We have studied enough to know they are a violent species. They fight among themselves constantly. They have nearly destroyed their own planet several times with their primitive nuclear weapons. This only confirms what we already know. They are chaotic, emotional, and incapable of unified resistance." Ira said nothing more. She simply nodded and returned to her silence. But something in her eyes suggested she was not convinced. 12,000 light-years away, in a bunker buried deep beneath the mountains of Korea, Admiral Park Tahoe stood before a wall of screens. The transmission from the Velith had arrived 1 hour ago. It was simple and direct. Surrender or die. The humans had been given 6 hours to make their choice. Colonel Kim Yoon-bai stood beside him, her face pale but steady. She was young for her rank, only 34 years old, but she had earned her position through skill and determination. Now, she faced the greatest test of her life. 6 hours, she said quietly, reading the translation of the alien message. "They're giving us 6 hours to hand over everything. Our planet, our resources, our freedom." Tahoe did not respond immediately. He was watching the screens, which showed satellite images of the approaching fleet. 400 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their weapons could glass entire continents. Their shields could withstand nuclear strikes. By every measure that mattered, humanity had already lost. But Tahoe had not risen to his position by accepting defeat. "Get me a connection to every military command on Earth," he said. "Every nation, every base, every ship and submarine and aircraft." Bai hesitated. "Sir, the political situation." The Americans and Chinese are still arguing about command structure. The Europeans can't agree on. Tell them the aliens don't care about our politics, Tejo interrupted. Tell them we have 6 hours before extinction. Tell them that if we spend those 6 hours fighting each other, we won't have to worry about fighting anyone else ever again. Within 30 minutes, the screens showed faces from around the world. Generals and admirals, presidents and prime ministers, all staring at the same information. The same fleet? The same impossible odds? Tejo spoke to them all. They think this will be over in 6 hours, he said. They have calculated our defeat based on our weapons and our ships. But they have made a mistake. They have measured everything about us, except the one thing that matters. He paused, looking at each face on the screens. They don't know what we are willing to do to survive. They don't know what a human being becomes when everything they love is threatened. They have studied our technology, but they have not studied Stalingrad. They have analyzed our weapons, but they have not analyzed what happened at Thermopylae. They see a primitive species with inferior tools. His voice hardened. They have no idea what's coming. In cities around the world, the preparations began. Not the preparations the aliens expected, not the assembly of fleets or the charging of weapons. Instead, people began to disappear. Soldiers moved into tunnels that had been dug in secret over decades. Civilians evacuated 2 underground shelters that appeared on no official maps. Factories that had been building cars and appliances were quietly converted to produce very different things. The aliens would arrive expecting a traditional war. They would expect enemy forces to meet them in open battle, where superior firepower would decide the outcome. They did not understand that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. They did not understand that humanity had learned, through blood and suffering, that the strong do not always win. They did not understand that a species which had survived ice ages and plagues, world wars, was not easily broken. In the darkness of space, the Velith fleet moved closer. On the bridge of the flagship, Fleet Commander Vosk reviewed his battle plans one final time. Everything was perfect. Every variable had been calculated. Victory was certain. He did not know that in a small apartment in Seoul, a 73-year-old grandmother named Yoon Hana was learning how to arm a bomb. He did not know that in the sewers beneath Busan, a young captain named Lee Jun-ho was leading his team into position. He did not know that across the entire planet, 8 billion human beings were preparing not to surrender, but to fight in ways the galaxy had never seen. The 6 hours had begun, and the Velith had no idea what they had started. The Velith fleet entered Earth's orbit like a storm rolling over a helpless village. 400 warships spread across the sky, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. On the bridge of the flagship, Fleet Commander Vosk watched the blue planet turn slowly beneath him. It was beautiful, he admitted to himself. A shame it would soon be scarred by war. Begin scanning for military installations, he ordered. Identify priority targets for the first bombardment wave. His tactical officers went to work, their clawed fingers dancing across holographic controls. Within minutes, they had mapped every major military base on the planet. The humans had made no attempt to hide them. Their primitive defenses were laid out like a feast waiting to be consumed. Commander, the lead tactical officer reported, we have identified 347 primary targets. Nuclear facilities, command centers, naval bases, air defense stations. Shall I begin the attack sequence? Vosk nodded. Begin bombardment. Show them the price of defiance. The first plasma strikes fell on military bases across Europe and North America. Massive explosions lit up the night side of the planet, visible even from orbit. Vosk watched with satisfaction as human defensive systems tried and failed to intercept the attacks. Their missiles were too slow. Their weapons were too weak. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, but then something strange happened, Commander, the tactical officer said. Confusion evident in his voice, we're detecting unusual activity on the surface. What kind of activity? The humans are turning off their cities. Power grids are going dark across every continent. Thermal signatures are disappearing. It's like they're hiding from us. Vosk frowned. This was not expected behavior. A primitive species facing superior force should either fight openly or surrender. They should not ... vanish. Increase scanning resolution, he ordered. Find them. But the humans were not easy to find. Across the planet, billions of people had moved underground. Cities that had glowed with light and heat just hours ago were now cold and dark. The aliens' thermal imaging, designed to track warm-blooded targets, found nothing but empty buildings and abandoned streets. "Commander," another officer reported, "we're detecting tunnel networks beneath the major population centers. Thousands of them. They appear to be ... extensive." Tunnels. Vosk's eyes narrowed. "How extensive?" The officer hesitated. "They connect entire regions, Commander. Some appear to be decades old. The humans have been preparing for something like this for a very long time." This was unexpected, but Vosk was not worried. Tunnels could be collapsed. Underground bunkers could be destroyed. The humans were only delaying the inevitable. "Send landing parties to the major cities," he ordered. "Secure the surface. Root them out." The Velith dropships descended through the atmosphere like metal rain. Each one carried 100 soldiers, equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Dominion could provide. Their shields could stop any projectile the humans possessed. Their plasma rifles could melt through steel. They were the elite of the Velith military, veterans of a dozen conquered worlds. They landed in the ruins of what had once been Basan, a city of millions reduced to smoke and rubble by orbital bombardment. The streets were empty. The buildings were dark. Nothing moved. Ground Commander Kresh led his battalion forward, his sensors scanning for any sign of life. "Spread out," he ordered. "Search every building. Find the survivors." They searched for an hour and found nothing. The city was a ghost, abandoned and silent. Kresh was beginning to think the humans had simply fled when one of his soldiers reported movement in a collapsed building. "Contact," the soldier reported. "One human, unarmed, moving toward our position." Kresh turned to see a small figure walking through the rubble. It was an old human female, her gray hair covered in dust, her clothes torn. She was holding something in her hands, a small box of some kind. "Stop where you are," Kresh commanded, his translator converting his words to the human language. "You are now a prisoner of the Velith Dominion." The old woman stopped. She looked up at the towering alien soldiers surrounding her, their weapons pointed at her chest. And then she did something that Kresh did not expect. She smiled. "My name is Yoon Hana," she said. "I am 73 years old. I have lived a good life. I have children and grandchildren. And I want you to know something." Kresh felt a strange sensation. Something was wrong. His instincts, honed by decades of combat, were screaming at him to run. "I want you to know," Hana continued, her thumb moving to a button on the box in her hands, "that we do not surrender. We never surrender. And we will make you pay for every inch of our world." The explosion killed Kresh and 30 of his soldiers instantly. The blast wave knocked down another 50. By the time the surviving Velith had recovered, human soldiers were pouring out of the sewers around them. Captain Lee Jun-ho led the attack. His team of 12 had become 50, then 100, as survivors from across the city joined them in the tunnels. They carried weapons that the aliens had dismissed as primitive rifles, grenades, rockets, but they also carried something else. Something the Velith had not calculated. They carried rage. The battle lasted for hours. When it was over, the Velith landing party had been destroyed. 300 alien soldiers, equipped with the finest technology in the galaxy, had been killed by humans using weapons that were centuries behind their own. Jun-ho stood in the middle of the street, breathing hard, blood running from a wound on his arm. Around him, his soldiers were gathering alien weapons, stripping armor from fallen enemies, learning the secrets of technology that had been denied to them. "Send a message to command," he said to his communications officer. "Tell them Busan is ours, and tell them to get ready. We're just getting started." Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out. In Tokyo, a group of engineers had figured out how to jam Velith communications. In Moscow, soldiers had captured an enemy dropship intact and were learning to fly it. In New York, civilians had organized into militias, that attacked alien patrols from every rooftop and alley. The Velith had expected the war to last 6 hours. But by the end of the first day, they had lost 2,000 soldiers and gained nothing. Their orbital bombardment had destroyed buildings, but not the people inside them. Their landing parties had been met not with surrender, but with a fury they had never encountered. On the flagship, Commander Vosk stared at the casualty reports in disbelief. This was not possible. The simulations had been clear. The humans should have collapsed within hours. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Why are they not surrendering?" His advisors had no answer. They had studied human technology and found it inferior. They had studied human military forces and found them scattered. They had studied everything that could be measured and calculated, but they had not studied human history. They had not read about the siege of Leningrad, where 1 million people starved rather than surrender. They had not learned about the Warsaw Uprising, where civilians fought tanks with bottles of burning fuel. They had not understood that humanity had spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds. They had measured the humans' weapons, but they had not measured their will, and now they were beginning to understand their mistake. In her bunker beneath Seoul, Colonel Kim Yoon-bai received reports from around the world. The news was not good. Millions were dead, cities were destroyed, and the alien fleet still controlled the skies. But hidden within the darkness was something else. Something that made her smile despite the horror around her. The humans were fighting. Not just soldiers, but everyone. Old and young, rich and poor, from every nation and every background. They were fighting with guns and bombs and bare hands. They were dying, yes, but they were also killing. "Send a message to all commands," she said. "Tell them to hold. Tell them this is only the beginning. Tell them we are not done yet." The first day was over. The war had just begun. 3 days had passed since the invasion began, and the Galactic Council had not moved from their observation chamber. They had come to watch a quick conquest, a simple demonstration of Velith's superiority. Instead, they had witnessed something that none of them could explain. Ambassador Threll stood before the council, but he was no longer smiling. The confident predator who had predicted victory in 6 hours now looked tired and confused. His scales had lost their shine, and his yellow eyes kept darting to the tactical displays that showed the war's progress. "There have been complications," he admitted. Elder Kirith of the Nolari leaned forward, his crystalline form flickering with sharp blue light. "Complications? Ambassador, your forces have lost 12,000 soldiers in 3 days. You have failed to secure a single major city. Your own reports indicate that human resistance is increasing, not decreasing." His voice carried a note that might have been disbelief. "You told us this would take 6 hours." "The humans are using unexpected tactics," Threll said defensively. "They refuse to engage in open battle. They hide in tunnels and ruins. They attack at night and disappear before we can respond. They are fighting like animals. They are fighting like a species that wants to survive," said Counselor Yera of the Mendari quietly. "Did you truly expect them to stand in neat lines and wait to be destroyed?" Threll's eyes narrowed at her, but he did not respond. He had no response. On the massive display screens, the council watched footage captured by Velith sensors. They saw a group of human soldiers attack an armored convoy with nothing but explosive packages strapped to their bodies. They saw civilians driving vehicles loaded with fuel directly into enemy positions. They saw wounded humans continue fighting until their hearts stopped beating. The Drakan War scholars, who had studied conflict for millennia, watched in silence. They had seen many wars across the galaxy, but they had never seen anything quite like this. Most species, when faced with certain defeat, chose surrender. They calculated the odds, accepted the inevitable, and preserved what they could. The humans did not seem to understand this concept. "They are losing," one of the Drakens said slowly. "By every measure, they are losing. Their cities are destroyed. Their military command structure is fragmented. They have no space fleet to challenge Velith orbital superiority." He paused, his ancient eyes fixed on the screens. "And yet they continue to fight. Why?" "Because they are primitive," Threll snapped. "Because they do not understand when they are beaten." Because they are too stupid to accept reality. Yura said, and something in her voice made everyone turn to look at her. They are not stupid, Ambassador. They are something far more dangerous. They are desperate. She gestured to the displays, and new information appeared. Historical records from Earth, translated by Velith Intelligence Systems. I have been studying their history, Yura continued. Not their technology, but their past. Their wars. Their conflicts. Do you know what I found? No one answered. I found a species that has been at war with itself since it first learned to make tools. I found civilizations that destroyed each other over land, over resources, over ideas. I found battles where humans died by the millions, not over survival, but over pride. Her large dark eyes moved across the council. They have been practicing for this moment for 10,000 years. The display showed images that made even the Dracon uncomfortable. Human wars depicted in their art and their records. Trenches filled with bodies. Cities reduced to ash. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to cause maximum suffering. This species has nearly destroyed itself multiple times, Yura said. They have created weapons capable of ending all life on their planet. They have used those weapons on each other. And still, they survive. Still, they grow. Still, they reach for the stars. She looked directly at Threll. You measured their ships and their weapons and concluded they were weak, but you did not measure what matters. You did not measure their capacity for violence. You did not measure their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. You did not understand that to a human, death is preferable to surrender.
Ow.
Threll was silent. For the first time since the war began, doubt showed in his eyes. Far from the council chamber, in the ruins of what had once been a city called Tokyo, Lieutenant Choi Sungmin led what remained of his unit through the darkness. They had been fighting without rest for 60 hours. Half his soldiers were dead. The other half were wounded in some way. They had run out of ammunition 2 days ago, and were now using captured Velith weapons they barely understood. But they were still fighting. Now there, Sungmin whispered, pointing to a shape in the darkness. A Velith command shuttle, grounded by damage from an earlier attack. Its crew was dead, killed by a group of civilians armed with farming tools. The shuttle itself was intact. Can we fly it? Asked Private Moonhijin, a young woman who had been a university student 1 week ago. She was now covered in blood and ash, and she carried an alien rifle almost as tall as she was. We're going to find out, Sungmin replied. They approached the shuttle carefully, checking for traps. The Velith had learned that humans like to leave surprises for their enemies' explosive devices hidden in bodies. Poison in water supplies, weapons rigged to fire when touched. The aliens had started calling them ghosts because of how they appeared from nowhere, killed and vanished. The shuttle was empty. Sungmin climbed inside and studied the controls. They were designed for Velith hands, with clawed fingers longer than human ones. But the basic principles seemed similar to human technology. Thrust, direction, power. Everyone inside, he ordered. We're taking this thing to orbit? To orbit? Hyjin stared at him. Sir, we don't know how to fly this. We don't know how to fight in space. We don't know anything, Sungmin smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. Neither did the first humans who built boats, he said. Neither did the first pilots who flew aircraft. We learned. We always learn. He powered up the shuttle, feeling the engines vibrate beneath him. And today, we're going to learn how to take this war to them. The shuttle lifted off, shaky and uncertain, piloted by a soldier who had learned to fly by watching aliens die. It rose through the smoke and the clouds, through the atmosphere, and into the darkness of space, and there floating among the stars. Was the enemy fleet? Sungmin looked at the massive warships, each one capable of destroying his tiny shuttle 1,000 times over. He looked at his Krutwelf, exhausted, wounded, terrified humans who had no right to be in space at all. Find me the biggest ship you can see, he said. We're going to introduce ourselves. The shuttle accelerated toward the Velith command cruiser. On its bridge, alarms began to sound. Unknown contact approaching, an officer reported to Commander Vosk. It appears to be one of our shuttles, but the identification codes are wrong. Vosk frowned. Destroy it. But before the weapons could fire, a voice came through the communication system. A human voice, speaking in broken Valeth language. This is Lieutenant Choi Soon-min of the Human Forces. We have taken your shuttle. We are coming for your ship. And after that, we are coming for your entire fleet. Vosk stared at the screen in disbelief. The shuttle was still coming, not slowing down, not turning away. It was heading directly for his ship like a thrown spear. They're insane, he whispered. But even as he said it, he felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. He felt fear. The battle for command. Cruiser 7 lasted 9 hours. 9 hours of corridor-by-corridor fighting of humans with captured weapons facing Veleth soldiers in their own ship. 9 hours of blood and fire and death in the cold darkness of space. When it was over, Lieutenant Choi Sung-min stood on the bridge of an alien warship. His uniform was burned and torn. 3 of his original 12 soldiers were still alive, but the ship was theirs. It's his human vessel Defiance. He broadcast to anyone who could hear. We have captured enemy command ship 7, awaiting orders.
Now on Earth.
In the bunker beneath Seoul, Colonel Kim Yoon-bai received the transmission. She stared at the screen for a long moment, not quite believing what she was hearing. A group of humans, flying a stolen shuttle, had boarded and captured an alien warship. Beside her, Admiral Park Tae-ho allowed himself a small smile. Get me a connection to that ship, he said, and tell our engineers to prepare. We just got ourselves a new toy to study. The capture of Command Ship 7 changed everything. Within hours, human engineers were learning the secrets of Veleth technology. The aliens' weapons, their shields, their faster-than-light drives, all of it was now in human hands. And humans, as the galaxy was learning, were very fast learners. On the 5th day of the war, Fleet Commander Vosk made the decision that would haunt the Veleth Dominion for generations. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by reports of mounting casualties and impossible defeats, he spoke the words that no Veleth commander had spoken in 300 years. Order the fleet to withdraw to the outer planets. We need to regroup. His officers stared at him in shock. Commander, one of them said carefully, if we retreat now, the humans will claim victory. The other species will see us as weak. The council can watch their own soldiers die if they want victory so badly. Vosk interrupted. His voice was tired, broken. We came here expecting to conquer a primitive world. Instead, we found something else. Something I do not understand. He looked at the blue planet on his screen, the planet that had cost him 87 ships and tens of thousands of soldiers. I have fought wars against a dozen species. I have never seen anything like these creatures. They do not surrender. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. He turned away from the screen. We retreat. Now, before they take more of our ships and learn how to use them against us, the Veleth fleet pulled back from Earth's orbit. Moving toward the cold outer reaches of the solar system, on the surface of the planet, humans emerged from their tunnels and bunkers and looked up at a sky that was, for the first time in 5 days, free of enemy ships. General Bay Murray stood in the ruins of what had once been a great city. Around her, soldiers from a dozen different nations worked side by side, clearing rubble and caring for the wounded. The old divisions, American and Chinese, European and African, Korean and Japanese, had dissolved in the fire of a common enemy. They were all just humans now. They're retreating, her communications officer reported, looking up from his equipment. The enemy fleet is moving toward Jupiter. A cheer rose from the soldiers around them. People embraced, wept, fell to their knees in relief. The impossible had happened. They had survived. But Murray did not cheer. She looked up at the sky, her eyes hard and calculating. How many ships did we capture? She asked. 17, General. Most are damaged, but our engineers say at least 8 can be made operational. Murray nodded slowly. And how long until we can fly them? The officer hesitated. General, our people have never flown alien spacecraft. We don't understand their systems. It could take months, Maybe years, too. We don't have years, Mireille interrupted. We have days, maybe weeks. Because right now, those aliens are regrouping. They're calling for reinforcements. They're planning their next attack. She turned to face her officer, and there was something fierce in her eyes. If we wait for them to come back, we lose. If we let them escape and tell their empire what happened here, every alien species in the galaxy will see us as a threat. They'll come for us with everything they have. She looked back at the sky. We don't just need to survive, we need to win. And the only way to win is to make sure they never want to fight us again. Within 2 weeks, human engineers had performed miracles. Working around the clock, studying captured technology, they had created something that no one had thought possible. Human-built ships using alien technology. They were crude, cobbled together from salvaged parts and human innovation. But they flew. And they had weapons. The first human interstellar warship was named Vengeance. It was crewed by soldiers who had never been to space. It was commanded by officers who had learned to fly by reading captured alien manuals. It was held together by determination and hope and rage. Private Jung Woo-jin stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. 3 weeks ago, he had been a student in a small town, dreaming about a girl he liked and worrying about his exams. Now he was a soldier on a spaceship, preparing to chase an alien fleet into the darkness between worlds. "Are you scared?" asked Captain Shin Biora, the ship's commander. She was only 30 years old, but her eyes looked much older. Everyone's eyes looked older now. "Yes," Woo-jin admitted. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream, that I'm back home and the sky is normal, and no one has ever heard of the Velith." Bora smiled slightly. "I know what you mean. Sometimes I forget what normal felt like. Do you think we can really win? Against an empire that NS thousands of planets?" Biora was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to the viewport and looked out at Earth, a small blue marble hanging in the darkness behind them. 3 weeks ago, she said, I watched my family's home burn. I watched friends die. I watched everything I knew get destroyed by creatures who thought we would surrender in 6 hours. Her voice was steady, but Woo-jin could hear the pain beneath it. And then I watched us fight back. I watched old women blow themselves up to kill enemy soldiers. I watched students learn to shoot alien weapons. I watched the whole world come together in a way I never thought possible. She turned to face him. Can we win? I don't know. Maybe the Velith will come back with 1,000 ships and finally destroy us. Maybe other species will join them. Maybe this is all pointless, and we're going to die out here in the cold. She put a hand on his shoulder. But I know this. We didn't survive for 10,000 years by giving up. We didn't crawl out of caves and build cities and reach the stars by accepting defeat. Whatever happens next, we're going to face it the same way we've always faced everything. How's that? Woo-jin asked. Biora smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the young woman she had been before the war, together fighting until the very end. The fleet moved out Tate ships, carrying 2,000 soldiers, chasing an enemy that had 400 warships and millions of troops. By any logical calculation, it was suicide, but humans had never been very good at listening to logic. Behind them, Earth slowly shrank until it was just another point of light among millions. Ahead of them, the unknown waited the first true test of humanity's place in a galaxy that had just learned to fear them. The hunt had begun. 1 year had passed since the Velith invasion began. 1 year since the galaxy had watched a primitive species face certain destruction. 1 year since everything the elder races thought they knew about warfare was proven wrong. Ambassador Threll stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council once more. But he was not standing at the center. He was standing at the edge among the observers, his once proud posture now bent with defeat. The scales on his face had turned gray, the color of shame in his species, the Velith Dominion, had lost. Not just the battle for Earth, but everything that followed. Human ships had pursued the retreating fleet to the outer planets, then beyond, into Velith space itself. World after world had watched in horror as the primitive species appeared in their skies. Not as conquerors, but as a message. You attacked us. We survived. Never again. The Velith had called for help from their allies, but no help came. No species wanted to face the creatures that had turned a 6-hour conquest into a galactic embarrassment. No empire wanted to be the next target of human rage. Now, for the first time in galactic history, a human stood at the center of the council chamber. Admiral Park Tae-ho wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver markings. He carried no weapons. He needed none. Behind him, a holographic display showed the flag of the United Earth's Coalition, a blue planet surrounded by stars. Designed in the months after the invasion to represent humanity's new unity, he looked older than he had 1 year ago. His hair had turned gray at the temples. There were lines on his face that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. But his eyes were steady and clear. Ambassador Threll, he said, his voice carrying through the chamber, 1 year ago, stood in this very room and predicted that humanity would fall within 6 hours. You calculated our defeat based on our weapons, our ships, our technology. He paused. I am here to discuss the terms of peace with the Velith Dominion. Threll said nothing. There was nothing to say. The Velith had lost 23 worlds to human counterattacks. Their fleet was reduced to a fraction of its former strength. Their economy was collapsing as trade routes were disrupted and allies abandoned them. We do not want your planets, Tae-ho continued. We do not want your resources. We do not want revenge. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every council member. We want what we have always wanted. What every species wants. The right to exist. The right to grow. The right to explore the universe without fear of extinction. Elder Kirith of the Nolari spoke, his crystalline form pulsing with uncertain light. Admiral, your species has demonstrated remarkable capabilities. The Council would like to understand your intentions. Do you plan to expand? To conquer? To build an empire of your own? Tae-ho shook his head. We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. But when it came, we did what we have always done. We survived. His expression softened slightly. Humans are not conquerors by nature. We are survivors. We have spent our history fighting ourselves, yes, but we have also spent it building, creating, dreaming of the stars. He gestured to the display behind him, which changed to show images of Earth, not the ruined cities and scarred landscapes of the invasion, but the recovery. Buildings rising from rubble, forests being replanted, children playing in parks that had been battlefields. This is what we want, Tae-ho said. Not war, not conquest. Just a chance to be part of something bigger than ourselves. A chance to meet other species as friends, not enemies. A chance to see what wonders the universe holds. His voice hardened. But let this be understood by every empire, every dominion, every council in this galaxy. Earth is not prey. It never was. The next species that comes for our world will not face a 6-hour war. They will not face a quick conquest. They will face a species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to survive against impossible odds. He stepped forward, and something in his presence made even the ancient Dracon shift uncomfortably. We do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We will lose battles. Yes. We will lose lives. We will suffer and bleed and die. His eyes burned with a fire that had nothing to do with anger. But we will keep fighting. We will keep learning. We will keep adapting. Because that is what humans do. That is what we have always done. And we will do it until there is no one left to fight, or until we have earned our place among the stars. The chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, slowly, Counselor Yura of the Mendari rose from her seat. Her large dark eyes were glistening, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I have lived for 300 years, she said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves and others. I have witnessed the worst the galaxy has to offer. She walked toward Tae-ho, her movements slow and deliberate. But I have also seen courage. I have seen hope. I have seen the light of determination in the eyes of those who refuse to accept darkness. She stopped in front of him and bowed her head. On behalf of the Mindari people, I welcome humanity to the galactic community. Not as subjects or supplicants, but as equals. As partners, as friends. One by one, other species rose and added their voices. The Nalari, the Dracon. Even some of the smaller races that had watched the war in terrified silence, they came forward and offered their recognition, their respect, their willingness to forge new relationships with this strange species that had defied all expectations. Only Threll remained seated. His gray scales dull in the chamber's light, he watched as the species that should have been his victims became the center of galactic attention. He watched as the power his people had held for centuries began to slip away, and he understood. Finally, the mistake he had made. He had measured human weapons and found them primitive. He had measured human ships and found them weak. He had measured human technology and found it centuries behind his own. But he had not measured human will. He had not measured the fire that burned in their hearts when everything they loved was threatened. He had not understood that a species which had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars was not easily broken. He had looked at humanity and seen prey. He had been so very wrong. Outside the council chamber, Admiral Park Teho walked to a viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights was Earth, his home, the world he had fought to protect. It was scarred now, wounded by war, but it was healing. And it was free. Counselor Yura joined him at the viewport. "What happens now?" she asked. Teho was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, a tired, hopeful human smile. "Now we learn," he said. "We explore. We make friends, and probably a few enemies. We make mistakes, and we fix them. We argue and fight and forgive each other." He looked at her. "We live. The same way we always have, and if another species attacks you," the smile faded, replaced by something harder, something that had kept humanity alive through millennia of challenges, "then we remind them why that's a bad idea." Yura nodded slowly. She turned back to the stars, and when she spoke, it was almost to herself. "I used to wonder what made humans different. Why you survived when so many other species failed. Why you fought when logic said to surrender. Why you kept going when everything was against you. Did you find an answer?" She looked at him, and there was something like wonder in her ancient eyes. "I think I did. You are not the strongest species in the galaxy. You are not the smartest or the most advanced. But you have something that many of us have lost. Something precious." "What's that?" Yura smiled. "Hope. Despite everything, despite all the evidence that the universe is cold and uncaring, you believe that tomorrow can be better than today. You believe that you can make it better." She turned back to the stars. "That is a rare thing, Admiral. Perhaps the rarest thing in the universe. Hold on to it." Teho nodded. "We will." And as he stood there watching the stars that his people had finally reached, he thought about everyone who had made this moment possible. Hannah, the grandmother who had given her life to kill enemy soldiers. Junho, the captain who had led fighters through the sewers of a burning city. Sunmin, the lieutenant who had captured an alien warship with nothing but courage and desperation. And millions of others whose names would never be known, who had fought and died so that humanity could stand here. Among the stars as equals, they had called it a 6-hour war. They had predicted human defeat before the day was over. They had been wrong, and the galaxy would never make a mistake again.